Welcome to Puro Politics, the political podcast of the San Antonio Express News. My name is Gilbert Garcia, Metro columnist, and I'm joined by
Carrie Clack, columnist, editorial board.
Metro editor Greg Jefferson.
Nancy Pryor-Johnson, associate editorial board editor. I
don't want to scare anybody because I if you've been watching the video versions of our podcast, you know that I never dress like this. But I had something I had to do before, so like it's not. I'm still the same person.
Promoted.
Yeah.
He's probably going to fire us when this is done. He's here for our severance package.
Doing an episode of the KLRN talk show, Texas Talk, which is going to air on Thursday. And I won't say too much about it, but I think it's I have a lot in there about what's going on politically right now. I think you all will find it interesting. But the big news, I think, nationally in politics was the Georgia Senate election last week. It was the runoff between Raphael Warnock, the incumbent, and Herschel Walker, the Republican challenger. And it as it turned out, it didn't end up deciding the Senate majority, although because of reasons that we're going to talk about later in the podcast, it may actually have done that because there were some developments later in the week. But this was a really telling race, and Carrie, you did a great column on it. And if you could just talk a little bit about, when you looked at this race between Warnock and Walker, what really stood out to you?
How historically bad a candidate Walker is, and it's not an exaggeration, and it's not. You can separate his misdeeds or the accusations with the girlfriends and the abortions and the lies about his education and business acumen from his just total ignorance on the issues. And that's what made him such a bad candidate. But because he was Herschel Walker, though, he was a celebrity. And one of the things which really became, at least for the African American community, difficult was it was kind of embarrassing that this is who Georgia Republicans thought could beat the pastor of Martin Luther King's church, who's the incumbent senator who has 2 master's degrees, a great speaker. And as I wrote, that there's no way that if Warnock was white, that Walker would have been the candidate. And if Walker was white, he would not have been a candidate. They selected Walker at Trump's insistence because he was a famous black Georgian who somehow they thought our other Georgians would go for. And he became a punching bag and a laughingstock, and there's a part of me that began to feel sorry for him. Sure. I mean, it was his decision to run to run for.
But he was really recruited by Trump and others, Sean Hannity and others.
And it's obvious if you create this myth about yourself throughout your life, you believe that you should be in the United States Senate. But there came a point when I felt bad for him because on one hand, it's like for Georgia Republicans, Herschel Walker was almost the embodiment of some of the worst stereotypes of black people, specifically when it comes to being ignorant. And I'll be frank, I did not like, it came a point in the last couple of months of the campaign, I did not like seeing on Twitter white liberals calling him a buffoon. I think he is ignorant. For whatever reason, he's appallingly ignorant, and he cannot string together sentences and thoughts. But as a black man, I didn't like white liberals calling him a buffoon, which fits into the stereotype. Now, of course, whites on the right weren't calling him that because they wanted him to win. But I also know what some of his folks were saying behind his back.
And Carrie, and some people talked about this, and I'm hesitant to get into it because I don't think we know the answers. But I think there were at least legitimate questions about the effects that football had on him, on his cognitive abilities. I mean, I've seen interviews with him from 30 years ago where he definitely was able to put his thoughts together more effectively than he does now. I certainly don't think he was qualified regardless. I don't think at any time in his life he would have been qualified because I don't think he really had the knowledge or the experience to be a U.S. senator. But there's that question in the mix too, and nobody really knows. I don't know how to deal with that.
And that was something I was saying early on. I mean, I think we all were saying after a while that he must have CTE, and yeah, it's one of the most obvious things you would say about a former football player and a running back who was all power and speed, who wasn't elusive, who took the hits. But then there's also a point where even with CTE, you can make an effort to learn about some of the issues you are going to speak on. But then going back to the CTE again, his sentences, all of us I can be incredibly inarticulate, but his sentences, you didn't understand them.
The erection when that sound clip that we've all heard and seen, and I think it was on Saturday Night Live as well. I mean, they didn't have to make it up, right? They just used what he said. But to say erection and then just nodding and agreeing, like he didn't just say what he said. Yeah. It's gross.
That was another
thing. It really
thing.
is.
Having to continually have these two white senators sitting beside him on television interviews and doing most of the talking.
It's humiliating.
Yes.
It's humiliating to him, really.
Humiliating. And I really, given Walker's problems in the past, I truly, truly hope that he's in a good place and that the people who are around him during this campaign and supporting him support him now. Because this campaign did nothing. Herschel Walker would have been much better off had he never embarked on this campaign. And we're going to always think of him in a way that maybe he doesn't deserve to be thought of.
It just makes me wonder. I mean, even, I don't know, you look back at his campaign and even his wife is right there by his side and campaigning for him. And I mean, I would have to tell my husband, like, please don't do that. Don't do this to yourself. It's embarrassing. It's humiliating. I mean, did he not have someone in his life who could look at it objectively and tell him, please don't do it? It's not right. It makes you look bad. It's humiliating. Someone who could objectively and tell him, advise him in a different way, because he was being used. I mean, absolutely used. And it's sad that he got as far as he did. It really is. And that his numbers came in.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. We lose sight of the fact that, I mean, because he was such a
says a lot about voters.
Yeah. 3 points. I mean, it was what, 2 points.
Like, why?
Difference between, exactly. In fact, that's what, to me, it's like just going through Twitter the day after the election. It's like you've got liberals like hardly like beating their chests. They were like shocked and appalled at the closeness of the race. And, there's something to that. Yeah. I mean, hopefully this is, the high watermark of candidates like this, very Trumpian candidates who are recruited on the basis of, their story, their celebrity, not because they know enough or have enough insight to be a
credible candidate. Yeah.
But it's like, probably not.
The Republican Party could do better. I mean, there has to be somebody better.
Yeah. And even taking the race issue out of it, and we saw Tommy Tuberville get elected in Alabama, and this was like a former Auburn coach, right? Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, I don't know how much you all have seen Tommy Tuberville, discuss policy, but I mean, it's really bad. And that's so it was basically that same type of thing. He's familiar. He's got these. I mean, we all know, particularly in the Deep South, how big football is, and so the Tuberville thing was Herschel Walker was that plus, like you said, the idea that. It's a very cynical thought that he's going to siphon off enough African American votes that it's going to make the difference. And I don't know what the final numbers are, but I don't think he did well with African American voters at all.
It was I think it was about 3%. Yeah. And the thing is that there are many black Republican conservatives in Georgia who are much more qualified. Mm-hmm. And for anyone who wants to think that my thing about this is Hawkins just because of the fact that he's a Republican conservative. Yeah. I mean, I disagree with Tim Scott on many things, but he's capable.
Absolutely.
A senator from South Carolina, he's a capable senator. Mm-hmm. He's not someone that you make fun of because of his position. Right. So it has nothing to do with the ideology. It was the candidate and the way, as Nancy said, that he was used.
Mm-hmm. Well, after that election, Democrats had a 51-49 majority, which only lasted a few days because it looks like now we're looking at 50-49-1. Kirsten Sinema, who'd been the Democratic senator from Arizona, declared she's been someone who's been some kind of a maverick figure, I think, the whole time she's been for the entirety of her term in the Senate. And she announced that she can now considers herself an independent. I'm not really clear on whether she's caucusing with Democrats or not. I've heard conflicting things. She said she was going to continue having her committee assignments were going to come through the Democratic majority. So I don't know exactly what that's going to mean in terms of caucus. I don't think she really had been a part of the, when the Democrats were meeting, she really was not a part of that at all. But I wanted to get your thoughts on, what she's doing here, like what the calculation is for her. She's got an election in 2 years, and what she's trying to do. I mean, what stands out to you?
I think to me, I think it's pretty clear she's looked ahead to the next election cycle, said this is going to be a bloody, bloody Democratic primary. Mm-hmm. Tell you what, I don't feel particularly Democratic. So yeah, I mean, I think really that's what it boils down to.
I want my challenge to be in a general election. I'm going to run as an independent, and so get around the primary process. Exactly. I mean, she's still going to have a very tough time in a general election.
I mean, how independent can she be, really? I mean, I don't think anybody can profess to be independent when you need the funding, you need the backers, you need the support to be able to just get elected and stay elected and do your job. I mean, she can say that all she wants and she can say, oh yeah, I'm independent, but when it comes down to it, she has to pick a side. Who's she going to get funded by?
She has said she did say that she was going to caucus with the Democrats, but and I don't think, I've seen what Schumer hasn't said anything about taking off of the committees. She's going to more likely than not be a Democratic vote. But this is so much what Greg says about the election. She's going to get clobbered, if not by Congressman Gallego. But she's vastly unpopular. She has yet to hold a town hall meeting since she's been in the Senate. That's
the side thing. Apart from the fact that there have been occasional votes, and she where she's conflicted with Democrats, and she was against the filibuster, and she's. There have been certain things she's done, but a lot of it is just not engaging with constituents very well.
And this is something that I think she thinks that one of the things with Warnock winning that I think a lot of us were thinking first, well, this takes away, and it does, some of the influence of Joe Manchin.
It does.
He's not the most important. So I see Sinema is thinking, well, this can be her, but I kind of what Nancy is saying. Ultimately, I think that she's gonna still vote Democratic because there is still that 2024 to look at.
But then you have like the group, it's called Vote Latino, right? And they announced they have the 6-figure, and this is before she made this announcement, they have the 6-figure campaign to oust her in 2024 and saying she does not stand up for the Latino welfare of Latinos at all, right? When it comes down to it. So I think it is going to be very difficult for her, and there are a lot of forces against her. And I do think Gallego, will come out on top there.
I just thought about this because thinking of a 2024 election in Arizona with Gallego for the Democrats and Sinema as an independent. What about Kerry Lake?
Oh, I think she's the first person I thought of. Yeah, she's and this is the real issue. I'll say this: the one thing that stood out to me about the timing of this, I thought she's looking at it as we all said, it's pretty much her own political future and saying, I don't have a path to victory in a Democratic primary. And so I'm trying to get around that. But if she really wanted to damage Democrats, I think she could have she could have announced this, let's say a month before or 3 weeks before the Georgia election. Because I think for Republicans, Republicans had a lot less motivation to come up to the polls if they felt that Walker could not get them the Senate majority. I think that hurt. And actually, if I guess was it Nevada? I guess that ended up clinching the let's say that had gone differently, and Walker could have been the ticket to a Senate majority. I think more Republicans would have come out. It could have been a slightly different race where they would have said, "Look, I know he's got issues, but This is the Senate majority on the line. When that was taken away, I think it really hurt Walker's campaign. And Kyrsten Sinema, she not only applauded Warnock's victory, apparently she donated to his campaign and said she was very happy that he won. And she could have hurt him, I think, somewhat by announcing this a few weeks earlier. So I don't think she's often been a kind of a contrarian, and I think she's frustrated Democrats because sometimes she almost seems to flaunt the fact that she's not gonna in line with them on certain things. But I think in this case, she actually timed it in a way that she didn't want to hurt Democrats. The flip side of that, though, is if she does run in 2024, which is a big if, but if she does, and you got a 3-person race, I just think in Arizona, the Republican candidate, whoever they are, they're going to get 40% at least, and that is probably going to mean that you're looking at a Republican senator, possibly Carrie Lake. And so, and again,
I mean, this is,
Isn't Lake contesting the last election results?
I was going to say,
she hasn't given up on that one.
I was going to say,
she hasn't given up.
You assume she's not going to be governor. She's asking in court in Phoenix.
Of course she doesn't believe the results.
Well, I would say this, if she backs off the election challenge thing, that might tell us everything we need to know about her thoughts about the Senate. She might just be like, hey, I don't know. I'm going to congratulate Katie Hobbs. Katie Hobbs ran a great campaign, and so I think that's a problem. And Carrie Lake, in her own ways, in the same category as Herschel Walker. This is not. It's not. There've been a lot of Republican senators from Arizona. It's been a historically Republican state. Obviously John McCain is a legendary figure there, but. It's not about what party the person belongs to. It's the fact that Carrie Lake is an extremist, an election denier, and though she's very smooth in her presentation, said some really deranged things in this campaign. And so I think that's the thing that Democrats should be worried about. And if you're Kyrsten Sinema, there has to be some bit of political realism in her saying, I'm not only going to lose this thing, I'm probably going to put Carrie Lake or someone like her in that seat. So I think that's going to be something to watch. I want to talk a little bit about Brittany Griner, who was released this past week from a Russian penal colony. She had been arrested in Russia. She's a great WNBA player who was playing in Russia. She was arrested for possessing medical cannabis. And the Biden administration executed a prisoner exchange for Russian arms dealer Victor Bout. She came through San Antonio, landed at Kelly Field last week, and was taken over to Brooke Army Medical Center. I think it's there were a lot of us who were, concerned about her. I think it was about 10 months that she had been in prison. But obviously everything is political these days, and there were complaints from Republicans about the nature of the exchange. And Victor Bout is certainly somebody who's, he was called, his nickname was the Merchant of Death. I don't think the Biden administration, I know that they didn't see what she had done as comparable to what he had done, or it was not a fair trade in that sense, but the Russians were not going to, I don't think they were going to give her up under any other conditions. Nancy, when you heard this story, what did you make of it?
I think everyone should be happy, but I know that they're not. Yeah. It should be a joyous, occurrence that an American is released. The circumstances are not the best. We do understand that. But this is an American who, it's ridiculous the amount of time and getting to what was it, a labor camp?
Penal colony.
Penal colony.
Yeah.
And, just the situation was really terrible. We wouldn't want any American to be left over there in that situation. But when you see the political back and forth on it, there are so many people who are upset about it. And that is just something that we shouldn't support, there's lots of political reasons. I think her being Black, her being gay, mm-hmm. her being, standing up after the George Floyd, mm-hmm. And standing up for what she believed in, and people hold that against her. So she has all these marks against her, but does that mean that she should be sentenced to the penal colony over there mm-hmm. in Russia? Hello, mm-hmm. right? Yeah. It's complicated. It's complicated. Then you bring up, Reed and of course Waylon over there. And so you say, well, they should have also sent Whalen over. And, I do believe that Biden, everything is pointing to Biden did try for that as well. And he's still continuing to try. But it's just, we're going to have to see what happens.
It was probably a choice between if Biden had insisted we have to bring, both of them, or they both have to be released, he probably would have gotten nothing. I mean, I think that's the sad reality of the situation.
I think that's what was said. That was ultimately they said either you it's Griner for boot, or there's no deal. You get no one.
Yeah.
And when Trevor Reed was released in April, and everyone, well, what about Griner and what about Raylan?
Sure.
Well, I think, and with the release of Griner, and once she was sent to the penal colony, I was thinking this is it. She's not coming back for a long time.
Bleak.
But there's never going to be an equal exchange when you're talking about an American who's wrongly imprisoned in Russia with someone that we have. I mean, again, you have the American prisoner whose nickname is BG, and the Russian prisoner whose nickname is the Merchant of Death. So, and I think we will eventually get Raylan back, and it's going to probably not be an equal exchange. But like Nancy said, I don't care who they are. You want all the Americans back, and that should be the one thing that we should all be united upon. But we're not. But regardless, any American who is unjustly imprisoned in Russia or anywhere, we should all want them back and do what we can to get them back. And negotiating for their releases, it's a tricky thing because you do want to be kept. Now again, with Boot also, it has to be remembered that he wasn't like serving a life sentence, so he had served almost half of his sentence, and I think would have gotten out within a few years anyway. So
yeah, way more than half. So I mean, to me, what was really disheartening about this was watching Tucker Carlson on Fox. I mean, so to the Trumpists, this is too tempting a target, right? I mean, you've got Brittany Griner, African American, gay. She was, busted for cannabis oil, and it's easy to portray the Biden administration as being so woke. They're going to seek her release, but not Whalen's, and it's just, and they just couldn't. It was reflexive, almost like automatic, like and it wasn't surprising to see Tucker Carlson that night making that argument. Just really disheartening.
And it should be noted. Again, Raylan and Reed were both arrested and convicted in 2018. 2018, who was the president? So all the talk about and Trump himself talking about all the unjust, that it wasn't a good deal. He did nothing. I think it was Raylan's brother said that Trump in that tweet said his brother mentioned his brother's name more times than he mentioned during his presidency, which was zero.
Whalen was there behind bars for like 2 years, I think, the last 2 years of the Trump presidency, and nothing really happened to that. And one of the things, and this is a side issue, this is getting into more of a sports issue than a political issue, but I mean, one of the reasons that you've seen Brittany Griner and other WNBA players playing overseas has been the fact that they're really not paid anywhere close to the level that professional basketball players should be getting paid, and they're working in the off season elsewhere, and it's a dangerous thing. But we're dealing with Russia, and hopefully that players will. And we'll see that.
And we forget also, especially in San Antonio, where justifiably so, Becky Hammond is an icon. Yeah. The hell she caught in 2008
I was thinking
because
of that.
she played for the Russians Olympic team.
Yeah.
And I mean, a lot of folks in San Antonio and the United States, she caught hell for that.
Yeah, that's right. So I mean, I think that there's it's the economics of the WNBA are not what the NBA is, but it's something that there needs to be a change there happening. Yeah. Absolutely. Before we wrap things up, I wanted to talk a little bit about something I wrote about this weekend has been bothering me. I think we've all been following this situation. The issue, there's been kind of a Republican war on drag shows that it's strange to me, like when I kind of look back on it, how so much of this has really just happened in this past year, and it's kind of an odd thing because drag shows have been such a part of American culture for so long, and I think there have been more than 100 protests or threats against drag shows across the country just this year. That issue came to San Antonio recently when the Starlighter announced that they were canceling all their drag shows for the rest of the year after they had protests there. I think the Aztec Theater, there's talk about protests against the show that they're going to have later this month. And it seems to me that what we're dealing with, I mean, this is all the things that we've heard about sort of kids. This has touched education as well. This issue that we're hearing from Republicans that children are being groomed in some way, and it's very depressing to me because I was revisiting the Anita Bryant campaign in 1977 when she was trying to repeal. She successfully repealed a Dade County ordinance, which was basically a non-discrimination ordinance for gays and lesbians in that county. And her argument was that teachers were going to be, that the gay community couldn't reproduce, so they had to recruit people. And they were going to recruit children, and having people in teaching positions was a dangerous thing for kids. And I think what we're seeing we've seen a lot of that kind of come back recently, that kind of argument when it comes to education, that if someone is gay or lesbian, they're not simply gay or lesbian, they are in some way a groomer or a recruiter for same-sex orientation. And the drag shows seem to be kind of being pulled into this argument.
I'm a little bit, aside from it just being disgusting and inflammatory and putting targets on the backs and on the lives of people because they are different from you or you don't approve of their lifestyle. I still don't understand how the drag show specifically came to be the target of this.
I think what some have suggested. I think there's something to this, that it's almost a reflection of how mainstream and popular drag shows have become. And you've had RuPaul with kind of has become such a big star and has kind of made it some drag shows something that are so popular that it is now started to kind of scare. Either scare people on the right or make them feel that this is an issue that they can take advantage of, because there are places where you'll have like a brunch show, a drag show that's family friendly, and I know I got some pushback, and there are people who disagree on this issue, who push back on the idea that it's possible for a drag show to be family friendly. I mean, to me, if you've got someone who's dressed as J-Lo and is lip syncing to a J-Lo song, and at a brunch show on a patio at a restaurant, and a family, parents decide to take their kids and sit out in the patio, I don't see how that is so that anyone's being particularly sexualized by that performance. But it seems there are adult-oriented drag shows. There are more family-friendly drag shows, and that's a concept that I think is not really registering with people. I think the notion of somebody in drag, the argument is being made that this is the sexualization of kids. And one of the things that's really weird too is that we're hearing so much about parental choice. Parents ought to have the choice. They ought to have a say in what's being taught in their classrooms and what books are in their libraries, what schools they send their kids to. But at the same time, if a parent chooses to take their kid to a restaurant and have brunch and watch somebody do a performance in drag, we've had Ron DeSantis and others talking about prosecuting those parents for child abuse. Parental choice gets thrown out there.
Yeah. You can't choose. I mean, and that's my whole point about, that's how I stand on these shows, right? If you don't like drag shows, don't go. Mm-hmm. And you should have the freedom to do that. So that's the whole Republican GOP extreme right freedom. Well, let that freedom stand and stop, trying to attack that freedom just because they're being who they are. They're not sexualizing kids. I mean, I'm a former teacher. Mm-hmm. Maybe there are queer people teaching here and there, but they're not there trying to groom children. Yeah. If one thing, they're more of an ally, like to be more understanding because, breaking news alert, there are children who are queer. danger, and they know it from a pretty young age. And yes, they need allies just to be a listening ear, but and just an understanding and a tolerance level, but they're not being groomed to change in any way.
And we're hearing, these things. I think Carrie Lake was one of the people talking about, drag shows in schools and everything. And when people tried to pin her down, there was, I think, a school in Virginia where there was talk about the use of an auditorium after hours by a former student who wanted to raise money for a theater program there. And they were going to have a drag show, and he had done it like 5 years in a row. And then suddenly this year, it just became this big scandalous thing. And, So, I mean, the culture wars are certainly like heating up, and this is going to be something that will continue to be talked about. I personally think it's a losing issue for Republicans. I mean, I think they get a lot of. There are people who feel very strongly about this and are frightened at the mere mention of drag shows. I just don't think it's a winning issue for them, though. With the if you're talking about.
I think it is. I think it for Republicans, for their far right base. Like
in a primary, you think? But in a general election, like if you had a presidential candidate in 2024 talking about this, I mean, do you think that would be, that's an effective campaign?
I mean, they're sending those mass emails. They're putting it on social media. They're playing up every instance of anything dealing with drag shows. They have these bills that have been filed. The reason they use this is just like they do other, social, any other kind of rhetoric like that. They were just trying to drum up the support and get them talking and look at Paxton. Paxton actually said, let's, even if the county, prosecutor, even if the DA doesn't prosecute these, I want to be able to do it. So make this bill happen, like pass this so I can do it, so I can prosecute. They're trying to make it look like there's some kind of cult, like as you said in your columns, some kind of cult is sexualizing children. And so they want that power. He wants that power. But why? He's trying not to talk about the real issues, right? And I think that's what the Republicans are doing. They latch on to these kind of issues, and these wars with these the book ban and other things like that. And then that's how they get all the attention off of what they really should be talking about. So
I also wonder how much indirection is at play here with Republicans. I mean, this is one way of saying, I mean, it's we're not in a political climate where they would feel comfortable just outright attacking the civil rights of the LGBTQ community.
Yeah.
But you can pick at aspects of it, like
that's a great point.
Drag shows, like school libraries that have, hey, I have two moms, or
right.
Hey, I have two dads,
there you go.
books like that.
That's right.
So it's making the point without making the point. You can you portray it as an aberrant thing, but we know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Like the whole lifestyle is aberrant. I just feel like there's something to that. I think that's what's really kind of fueling these attacks on drag shows. And by the way, I mean, we should point out this is happening in San Antonio. I mean, we've got there's a live music venue in the Deco district on Fredericksburg.
Yeah.
They have all kinds of events, but they include drag shows. Yeah. They had it was a toy drive. This is the weekend after last. It was a toy drive - drag show. The drag show didn't actually happen until later in the evening. It was a pretty small audience. We've heard about a dozen people were there during the drag show. But yeah, I mean, they got so many threats that they just said, okay, we're not doing, through the end of the year, we're doing no more drag shows. I think they had 3, 4 on their schedule. They're continuing doing other shows, but I mean, it clearly affected their business. They clearly felt under threat. And also, there's a drag show Tuesday night at the Aztec Theater. Yeah. They're expecting protests there as well.
And the one that you mentioned, the Starlighter, this isn't like, that was not, I don't think kids were involved. No. I mean, it was just so
they have to take it seriously because, I mean, look at what happened at Club Q.
That's right.
In Colorado. I mean, they have to take it seriously. They can't just say like, oh, they're just talking because, 5 people dead, 18 injured. I mean, there are some loons out there that are just not talking. They take it seriously and they get empowered by this kind of rhetoric, and you just never know.
As you said, Greg, I mean, it's a way of not saying I'm homophobic or I'm anti-LGBTQ. It's more, we got to protect our kids and kids shouldn't be sexualized. But then it starts extending into cases like the Starlighter here, which really had nothing to do with kids at all.
Yeah.
I mean, as far as the performance.
Yeah, it was a toy drive.
Yeah.
But like,
but as far as the audience that was there or
yeah, exactly. I mean, the social media complaint was that there was a child present, and that one of the performers was stroking her hair. The kid, it turns out, was the child of a vendor who was right on the other side of the door. It wasn't left alone.
And again, it's a parent's choice
to
allow their child to be there.
Yeah.
It should be the parent's choice.
Parental choice for those on the ride. Remember, parental choice. Anyway, thank you all for listening. We hope everyone's doing well, and we'll be back with you next week. Take care.